Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to continue on with our Resto Druid challenge, and while I hit my goal of 0 to hero, I wanted to name change, continue on with the challenge, and experience the full breadth of Pug life. So I haven't been looking up builds, but I think I'm pretty close to what the optimal build is for playing Druid. And I've been messing around and experimenting with some different talents. But boy, oh boy, today was a really interesting experience of levers, bad attitudes, the works, really, for the Pug M+ experience. So, starting it off, we had an AutomaticJak run at 20 for Tyrannical, and this one's kind of on me, okay? It's kind of on me. Turns out, convoking on pull for Razan, not the best. I was a little confused as to why the tank was kiting away from me, but you know, that was a little bit of an unfortunate occurrence. The tank just didn't have any aggro, and we all got feared. Woo! That being said, we probably could have ended up timing this dungeon, but people left just as quickly as the keystone started, which really just baffled me because that's still a very chestable dungeon, even if you have like an early wipe. And in fact, a lot of the 20s are very, very forgiving if you're having wipes. So starting off, that was the very beginning of our day. Our next dungeon we went through was at 21 Tyrannical Fall. My druid's around 476, so I thought this would be a pretty solid challenge in a Pug environment to go through, and depending on the quality of the group, could be really easy or pretty hard. And some people in the group wanted to make it a little bit hard for me, as we had just a lot of deaths and we're burning through all our battle reses as quickly as we could. We even got my favorite is when somebody hits you with a little ... and you get to respond back that there are no battle reses available because everybody used them already. But without the DPS, the fight really went for a crazy, crazy long time on the Timeways boss. And we also had a number of slow fields that were spawning as well. And so that was an interesting moment to stretch the limits of Resto Druid and defensive value, all that kind of fun stuff. I had a couple moments where I'm like sprinting through with bark skin or both barks up or bear form, just to make sure I keep everybody alive. And I liked this because it also was helping me realize like how best I can set up my healing. Because once I started switching to Grove Guardians, I wasn't using nearly as much rejuve, thank goodness, and I was able to see just kind of how wasteful it is to be casting lots of rejuves when you don't really need to, and how you can lean on your Grove Guardians to be able to assist you. But there's been a lot of moments still where I feel like I'm overhealing really heavily and not like properly ramping up my Grove Guardians to take advantage of them. That definitely kind of came back to bite me on this boss fight, especially when we had to run through some of the slow fields from some of like, it wasn't even the Mist Dispelled, it was like the second Dispel that was going off, the one that expires, where people were just in like bad positions and everything for it. Volcanic certainly was not helping, but yeah, we just had a few different times where that was a pain to deal with. And of course, after that boss fight, the shaman left, unfortunately, or just went offline. So we had to continue on with the dungeon, and since it's fall, the dungeon timer is really forgiving. It was like, yeah, sure, we're gonna be able to do this, we're gonna be able to take care of it. We went, you know, pretty slow and steady to go through the dragons leading up to Blight of Galacrond, and then everything just kind of started going wrong with Blight of Galacrond. They were previously trading off, I think it was the Prot Pally and then the Demon Hunter were trading off their debuffs fine. And then it started to just be not fine for the trade-offs, and then everybody just started dying all around. I don't even know what he was playing. What are you doing? Why are you standing in bad? Give that to me. Okay. Now, the tank or the Shadow Priest straight walked into goo there. Alright guys, back-to-back levers. Okay, that guy in that group left because we didn't battle res him. And we couldn't battle res him because it was on cooldown. And then when battle res came back, somebody else died and we res that person instead of him. Unfortunately, that went from a very timeable dungeon, even when 4-manning it, to not timeable whatsoever. And keep in mind, this happened exactly after our AutomaticJak run. If you're enjoying our Pug adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out our Patreon or joining as a member on the channel itself if you'd like to support further. Now that brings us to our third dungeon of the day. And again, all of these were back to back to back. This one started off really weird. I don't have a way with my UI setup at the moment to be able to track everybody's item level, but I was kind of just looking at the eye level of the team and seeing that, you know, some people were a little bit lower than others, which has happened. We don't know if it's people who are playing with their friends or whatever, right? But you can kind of see some people who are lower level, and some of the deaths happening that people weren't entirely familiar with what was going on. So again, not entirely unexpected since this is the Pug Life series we've been doing. But things really got odd. We got to the first boss, got it down, still had some deaths, and then right after the first boss died, the Feral Druid group says, "Hey, I'm not here to carry," and then leaves. Doesn't respond to whispers, fully logs out. Nothing. Wait, he left? I'm not carrying, sorry. What the fuck? The guy left and said, "I'm not carrying." What? You weren't even carrying. I mean, that guy, I don't know what his eye level is, but, you know. So we kill the first boss, and naturally we decide, hey, let's 4-man it and continue on to the second. And that was a super odd experience because we were in like a perfectly timeable environment. We got through, you know, the first 40 or 50% of the trash mobs and didn't have too many other terrible parts of the dungeon really ahead of us at that point. And it was very, very timeable. So we just decided to be able to continue with 4-manning it. And oh my God, we racked up so many deaths. When you're lacking even more kicks in a kick-heavy dungeon, Prot Warrior is pretty sick for the reflex, but man, you really notice how insane it is to have Vengeance Demon Hunter on hand. Even if a Vengeance Demon Hunter isn't playing perfectly, you still really get to notice the value of all the sigils in the group, all the shutdowns that they bring to the table, and that other tanks, you know, frankly do not. And so this became quite a challenge to make sure I'm healing through all the casts going off, healing through people getting silenced, standing in things, in addition to that. And so it got really, really hairy. We got into the third boss room with the Mindbender, and we lacked a lot of spell reflex, unfortunately. I think they got off 1 or 2 of them, but most of the time I just had to sit there, buckle down, and heal through and muscle heal through. I think I switched to, I think it's Photosynthesis, where you get the double Life Bloom on hand. So I kept a Life Bloom on myself and moved the Life Bloom to whichever target, whether it was the tank or when I couldn't dispel, to whichever target had just required a ton of healing. And I just worked on like how I can best muscle through the additional healing that's required on the encounter. And so that was pretty fun. I also kind of caught myself and realized I need to set a better tracker for dispels on an encounter like that, where you have to dispel one, heal another, dispel one, heal another. But at least my output was like more focused. And I really noticed how much Druid needs to be putting up all of these hots to make sure they're able to do some decent single target, especially when you don't have a Treant on hand to be able to help you along the way. So that was an interesting challenge. I'd previously experimented with some talents like Overgrowth and Invigorate, and I really liked how they felt, but having like the cooldown sort of desynced to them was really annoying. And so I opted, of course, not to continue running with those. And there weren't too many scenarios where you needed to have constant single target. But I felt like of all the dungeons, this one might have been a good one. We continued on after killing that third boss into the last area, the gauntlet of the room. And this is where the pulls just didn't make sense to me, because we kept on grabbing more things. Like I get on Sanguine of, oh, hey, a heal went off. Okay, just chain it into the next thing. But that's usually when all the mobs are sort of like pacified, or they've been kicked, or the dangerous mobs are dead, or whatever it is. We just kept on pulling more. We had like some of the Gilban Hunters almost dead, and we killed the first sentry, for example. But while we already have all the other corruptions from the very first sentry that we killed, we decided to pull another sentry on top of it. No disease spell for Resto Druid, and so I'm just slamming every single button that I have, trying to make sure that we can stay alive as all this extra pulsing damage is going out. And then chaining that sentry into all of the casters. So we're dealing with the sentry damage, the corruptions detonating and increasing our damage taken, and multiple Aqua Mages just straight up casting into us with no DH sigils, no melee kick from the Feral that had left. And this just turned into like It went from, I don't know, 7 or 8 deaths or something like that into like 15, into almost like 20, I think, at one point from all of these deaths. And then for whatever strange reason, the hunter, who was not doing great damage the entire time and was dying quite a bit, also decided to hit the plug pull and also went offline, just like the Pharaoh went offline. He left, but why? He's going in. The tank is not over. He's not done with this. Yeah, I know you guys have seen a 4-man, but have you ever seen a 3-man? And so by the time that we actually ended up surviving all of this trash and we're approaching the final boss room, it was myself and 2 warriors to be able to take on Ozomat. We ended up approaching Ozomat with 3 players, 1 tank, 1 healer, 1 DPS, 2 battle reses, and twice over the course of the fight, I had to use battle reses to be able to bring the tank back to life. And I constantly felt like we were just like 1 step away from having a full wipe and losing pretty much everything. This was kind of fun because it also made me like really focus on what little crowd control I had to help shut down these mobs. I didn't have a kick talented into, but I was trying to take better advantage of Ursals and Typhoon just to have some kind of knockbacks or some way to group all the ads together. It did help that the DPS and myself were always being targeted by the cleansing waters. And so there was this like 10 or 15 second immunity window that the 2 of us had. And then all I had to do was just fixate on healing the tank the entire time. Because the tank, since it took a lot longer to kill all the ads, he was getting absolutely railed by the sludge debuffs that the ads were putting out onto him, making it substantially harder to be able to heal him, as he was also eating some of the frontals that the boss was putting out. So we had a couple of moments where it was near death experiences for the warrior DPS and myself. 2 deaths that actually did go out onto the warrior tank, as we were just sort of struggle bussing between clearing any of the garbage on the ground, healing the tank enough, trying to add some extra damage to deal with all the sludges, and make sure that I was using bark as frequently as I possibly could for our tank to help keep him alive. This was by far the hardest healing that I've had throughout our adventure so far, and we actually were able to do it, surprisingly enough. We were able to 3-man the dungeon, and as a fitting reward, only one of us got loot in the group, which means that one of the people that left our group as we were going through the dungeon is going to be able to log in at some point, and they will find a piece of loot from the run that we completed with only 3 people continuing. Which is crazy, because I thought we had some kind of like penalty system being added into M+ for leavers, but yeah, who knows? Who knows? This was just a mind-bending experience that we had throughout Pug Hell, and I just had to share it with you guys, so enjoy.